brothers and sisters. I'm Pastor Joyce's husband, Pastor Alex, and today I'm going to tell you a story of Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. The story takes place during the last week of Jesus' life on earth, before dying on the cross. He entered the city of Jerusalem, riding in on a donkey on a Sunday, and cleansed the temple, turning over tables and chasing off money changers. Then he came back the next day and spoke to the crowds in parables. The parables were clearly talking about the priests and the Pharisees, and not in a good way. At the end of chapter 21, it says, they looked for a way to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd. The people believed that Jesus was a prophet. And so we come to today's passage, where we have the angry Pharisees making plans to trap Jesus in his words. They wanted to catch him saying something wrong, so that they could have a legitimate reason to take him to court. But how were they going to do this? Well, the Pharisees found some unlikely allies. They teamed up with the Herodians, a group mentioned only 3 times in the Bible. The Pharisees were a religious group within Judaism that was dedicated to strict observance of the Torah, the law of Moses. The Herodians, on the other hand, were followers and supporters of King Herod, meaning that they were supportive of the Roman Empire and the emperor who appoints King Herod. These two groups normally don't see eye to eye, but it seems they found a common enemy in Jesus. And so the Pharisees and the Herodians came to Jesus in the temple, and they said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of honor. You teach God's way truthfully. You don't let others tell you what to do or what to say." Do you see what they're doing here? They seem to be praising Jesus, saying flattering words to him, but their real intention is to lower his defenses and hopefully make him carelessly say something that would get him in trouble. And then came the trap. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it right to pay the royal tax to Caesar or not? Now, what was this royal tax they were asking about? You may have learned that the Romans taxed every part of life in their empire, but this tax they were referring to was called the poll tax. It's basically a head tax that every adult in the empire had to pay every year. It was a symbol of the Roman rule over the Jewish people and their land. Now the Pharisees and the Herodians asked Jesus if it was right or lawful to pay this tax to Caesar. Now on the surface, it would seem pretty straightforward to say, yes, of course it's lawful to pay taxes. Taxes are required by law. But it's not the Roman tax law that they have in mind here. They want Jesus to say whether it is lawful according to Jewish religious law, the law of Moses. It's almost like the Pharisees and the Herodians were bringing this argument between them before Jesus to ask his opinion. You can imagine, on the one hand, the Pharisees saying, no, we shouldn't pay taxes to the Roman emperor because the Roman emperor was seen to be a god, so to honor him would be idolatry. Whereas the Herodians would obviously support paying taxes because they want to keep King Herod in the emperor's good books. Jesus, teacher, settle this for us. We know that you won't take sides or play favorites. So tell us truthfully, who's right, us or them? Should we or should we not pay this royal tax to Caesar? Now, why was this a trap? They knew that if Jesus said, yes, it is lawful, that he would lose the support of the people who had just welcomed him into the city, hoping that he would be their king. On the other hand, they knew that if he said, no, it's not lawful to pay this tax, they could seize him and turn him in to the Roman authorities for inciting a revolt. They put Jesus in a no-win situation. But Jesus saw right through them. He knew their intentions, and he called them out on it. You pretenders, you hypocrites, you have no interest in the law. You're just trying to use the law as an excuse to trap me. But Jesus wasn't about to shy away from their question. He wasn't afraid of them. If it's an answer they wanted, then an answer they will get. And so Jesus said to them, show me the coin people use to pay this tax. And so, curious to see how he might actually get out of their trap, they bring him a silver coin. And Jesus holds up this coin and asks them, whose picture is this, and whose words? Now this coin, the denarius, had the image of Caesar and his inscription on it, just like the coins we use today have Queen Elizabeth II's image and inscription. The denarius inscription read, Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. Now you might remember Augustus as the Caesar from when Jesus was born, and Tiberius was the Caesar during the time of Jesus' ministry. Unlike the blank copper coins used in Jewish daily life, this coin was associated with pagan worship and the worship of the emperor. In other words, idolatry. The Pharisees and the Herodians said to Jesus the obvious answer, Caesar's. And Jesus replied to them, so give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. But he didn't stop there. If he did, perhaps the Pharisees would have understood him as saying, let us submit to Caesar, like a traitor to his people. But Jesus goes on to say, and give back to God what belongs to God. So, Caesar is not the only authority that you have to obey, and he's certainly not the highest authority. But obeying God doesn't always mean that you have to disobey Caesar. In fact, in most cases, the two aren't opposing each other. You Pharisees think you can defy Caesar in the name of God, yet you use his money and benefit in many ways from his empire. You really are hypocrites. Hearing this, they were amazed. Here they thought they had him. And yet Jesus somehow managed to give an answer that did not take either side. So they left him and went away. But Jesus was not only giving a clever answer or sidestepping a trap. He was also laying down an important principle. We should obey and submit to worldly authorities when they aren't opposing God's authority. On the one hand, Jesus was saying that even a pagan, idolatrous, violent, even oppressive government should be obeyed. He didn't advocate the overturning of the Roman Empire. On the other hand, Jesus was saying Caesar was not the ultimate authority. God was. There were limits to what Caesar could claim to be his, even though the lines aren't always clear or obvious. For the early church that Matthew was writing for, this had serious implications. They were coming under persecution by the Roman authorities because they claimed to have another lord besides Caesar. They were taught to give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but worship belongs to God alone, and refusing to worship Caesar would lead to the death penalty. In the Second World War, the Nazis demanded that the church become a tool for the state. That's when the confessing church spoke up and refused to bow to the Nazi government, which was setting itself up in opposition of God. And many of those in the confessing church, like the famous theologians Karl Barth and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, were persecuted for their resistance. Today, although we don't have a Caesar ruling over us, the worldly authorities still make claims on our lives that should belong to God. This is more severe in some parts of the world than others, but even here in Canada, we need to be careful about what belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God. Is marriage, for example, something that the government gets to define and control? What about life itself? How much of a say should the government have over the matters of birth and death, the beginning and end of life? The point is this, brothers and sisters. We belong to two kingdoms. One of them here on earth, a kingdom of this age. Another one of heaven, an eternal kingdom. They're not necessarily in conflict. It is possible to obey the government of the land and obey God at the same time, most of the time. But you might ask, how do we tell what belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God? In short, all things ultimately belong to God. But Jesus gives no easy or simple answer here. Instead, we always live in tension between the two kingdoms, and we have to constantly wrestle with each situation to figure out if it is something that Caesar has a right to or not. In cases where Caesar opposes God's authority, like requiring the church to serve the government, or to preach a different gospel, or even to stop preaching the gospel altogether, let us honor God by disobeying Caesar. But in areas where Caesar has the God-appointed authority, let us honor God by honoring Caesar, even if we dislike their laws because it means paying taxes or limiting our freedoms. But just like the silver coin belongs to Caesar because it bears his image, so we belong to God because we bear his image. All that we are, all that we have, belong to God first and foremost. He is our first and ultimate loyalty. If we honor Caesar, it is because we honor God. If we disobey Caesar, it is because we obey God. Whatever situation we find ourselves in, let us wrestle with it to find how we can honor God.